I think people underestimate fun in their decision making. Obviously, you need to, make sure the ROI is there. But like sometimes when I'm working with a leader who's trying to make a big decision, we'll just talk about, well, for the next 5 years, what would be the more fun job for you? What's wrong with that? And it's like, wait, I can consider that? Yeah, of course you can.
Welcome to High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. This season, we're diving deeper with more solo episodes, where I'll share the experiences that have led to recognition by EY, Forbes, Fast Company, and others. Not as a boast, but as milestones on my entrepreneurial path. From growing multi-million-dollar firms to successful business exits and building high-performance teams with a global perspective. I'll reveal the insights and strategies from my journey and share them with you so that we can win together. Alongside these solo episodes, we'll have industry visionaries and thought leaders, and we'll explore effective leadership. Ready to empower your leadership journey with real success stories? Let's embark on this transformational journey together.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of High Octane Leadership. I'm your host, Donald Thompson. I'm joined today by Ari Butler, an executive coach and communication expert who helps leaders turn their expertise into influential power. As the founder of AB3 Group, Ari combines decades of leadership training with a unique background in professional theater and television, having appeared on HBO, Netflix, CBS. He's advised senior leaders at global giants like Goldman Sachs, Google Cloud, and PepsiCo, focusing on the human antidote to our AI-saturated world. Authentic, meaningful connections are his superpower. And one of the things that I'll tell you, and Ari, welcome to the show. We are really, really glad to have you. One of the things I'll share with you, this is a quick funny story, and then we'll get into it, is Ari and I were introduced by a mutual friend in the Northeast, and we were trying to get together. I live in North Carolina. Ari's based in New York, and Ari came down for some business. We just couldn't get together and get it together. And I get a phone call on, I guess, a Thursday, right? Or maybe it was a Thursday evening from the CEO of one of the firms that I've invested in, and his name is Greg Boone of Walk West. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to dinner. Have you heard of this guy, Ari? He's down from New York. He's big shot. He's awesome. He's this communication specialist. And he came down to really, really talk to some leaders in Raleigh." And I'm like, "Ari who?" And he said, "Ari Butler." And I was like, yes, I know Ari. And so even though we didn't get together, someone in our circle got together. You all had a great time. And it's just going to be the foundation of some cool things to come. So Ari, welcome to the show. We're really, really glad to have you.
Well, thank you. What I remember about that dinner is that Greg was asked several times by several of the other leaders that were at the table with us, what does he do? And he knew exactly how to handle that moment. He spoke eloquently about from a high level perspective. He's in the AI space and tech, and he's made it relevant to everybody at the table. And he did a great job. He's a very compelling person. And then eventually the conversation moved to, who's this person here from New York? What do you do, Butler? And my answer was that I train people to answer questions like that as compellingly as Greg just did, to make it immediately relevant, to tell some stories, to talk in a concise way about the value of the work that you do. In a nutshell, that's what I'm brought to work with leaders around the world to be able to do, to be more like Greg.
That's awesome. We both aspire to that. I want to jump in because I'm really, I love to learn. And I love to talk to people with unique points of view. And as we get into the detail on the coaching and the communication, I'd love for you to unpack getting started in acting, because that has shaped some of the communication skills. So I'd love for you to unpack a little bit that part of your background.
Sure. Look, I do think that having a background in communications and the performing arts gives you an unfair advantage, maybe not in your ability to get hired, but I do believe in your ability to get promoted. As you know, as anyone who's been risen through an organization knows, at a certain point they stop worrying about whether or not you're smart enough, if you have enough experience, if you have the right credentials. The question is anybody listening? Do you know how to manage a team? When you say to your people or to your stakeholders or your buyers, I believe this is the right solution for you, are you building trust or depleting trust? And in the same way that we know when we see bad acting, even if you can't describe why it's not feeling authentic to you, you also know when you see bad leadership, even if you can't pinpoint exactly why it doesn't feel right to you. And I do think that there's an overlap between communication skills, performance skills, and leadership skills. Why I believe I'm uniquely positioned in this work is another question. I don't think there's a shortage of actors who can help leaders, elevate their pitches. I think at the AB3 group, we're taking a much more intimate approach to leadership than just how you appear on the spotlight.
That is awesome. I think that our past experiences shape our current moments and the things that we can pull from those moments and really, like you said, create that uniqueness, right? Because one of the things in the opening, right, that AI saturated world, right? Because everything is becoming harder to distinguish between what is real and what is authentic. And so I think we're at an inflection point really as a society, right? In terms of who do you trust and how do you build that trust as a communicator? And so one of the things that I would like to ask as we look at getting into our conversation today, what are some of the things that you help people with, and being a little bit more specific, some of the challenges you see leaders have, and then how you help them unpack those and move forward to become that authentic communicator, that unique leader?
Sure. Me and my colleagues at the AB3 group, we're working with leaders, of course, on how they appear in the spotlight, right? It's their turn to talk, and hopefully they can show up in that moment. But leadership today is not just when you give your TED Talk or when it's your turn on the agenda. There's one-on-one consultative conversations. It's your ability to orchestrate a meeting where people feel included. You invited all of these smart people to your meeting. What are you doing to get their ideas to surface, even if they're not the loudest or the most extroverted or the highest seniority person there? Do you have a strategy to get their ideas into the conversation? Are you able to tell stories that actually make people feel closer to you? They're not just, how great you are and what great ideas your company had, but like to actually demonstrate what you value and what it looks like when you show up in the face of adversity or when you mess it up. Like, do people understand from the stories you're sharing what it's like to interact with you in the good and the bad times? So, there's an intimacy to the work that we're doing.
So one of the things, Ari, that I'd love to give you a chance to unpack is you talked about leaders' time in the spotlight. You talked about if a leader is pulling smart folks into the meeting, how do they set the stage for it to be a successful meeting? I hear what you're saying. Unpack it a little bit deeper in terms of how you coach people to be that better facilitator, that better leader and orchestrator in a meeting environment.
Great, Don. Let's take your example, right? You've invited people to a meeting. Right. Well, first of all, you didn't invite people to watch your pitch. You invited them to a meeting. So that implies that their ideas are going to be relevant to the conversation as well. If you're just going to click through your deck, maybe there will be time for Q&A at the end or not. Just tell them you want to come to my webinar, you want to come to my pitch. But getting aligned on what the outcome or impact or how you want them to participate is one of the first questions I would ask. What do you want the experience to be for the people you've invited to the meeting? We talk a lot at the AB3 group about impact, right? Communication is measured on the receiving end. So are you as a leader trying to create urgency, or are you trying to create calm, right? That question alone will fundamentally change the way you show up. And by the way, it's not an acting class. When you're arguing politics with your father-in-law, or when you're sitting bedside with your grandmother, or when your nephew scrapes his knee, or you're rooting for one of your teams, you show up authentically, but wildly different versions of yourself. So I'm just asking leaders, what does it look like when you're welcoming people into a conversation in the same way that if I said, hey, Don, you want to get nachos later? I would authentically know how to do that versus, if I said, okay, so what questions do you have? Immediately you're sending a message from the way you're communicating that you're not really open to their ideas. And then there's the ways that you facilitate, that you invite people to participate. If it's a decision making meeting. It's useful for people to know that the decision is being made by me, the boss, or at the end, we're going to vote, or in 2 weeks, I'm going to let you know based on this consultative conversation what has been decided. That'll dictate the way people behave. If it's a brainstorming meeting, what is your mechanism for bringing ideas out? Because you have 30 people on your call. A brainstorming meeting doesn't work if you just say, okay, let's go top left to, top right, and then down each row and here everyone, that's not a recipe for engagement. So look, we come with, I believe tried and tested methodologies to approach a circumstance like the one you presented, Don. But the real question is always, what impact are you trying to have? Because any consultant that tells you there is a right way to do it is, you should fire that person. It all depends on what you as the communicator are aiming at and what the experience is on the other end.
That is powerful. One of the things, Ari, you've worked as an actor, and there's a lot of pressure in the things that you've done to get it right, to be on in that moment. You've also worked in the executive space where there's a lot of pressure to deliver and a lot of demands on those executives. How do you work with people on managing their calm, managing their message in very high pressure environments, right? Because a lot of times that it's not that the executive doesn't know how to manage the meeting, but we all behave sometimes differently when the pressure is the highest. How do you help people when we add that pressure level to what we're doing to stay in the moment, in the right tone, the right context?
Yeah, it's a very personal question that you're asking, Don. The answer is that it depends from person to person, and too frequently we see people taking other people's answers to this question. And I mean, it's good to test those things on, but like what one pitcher does on the mound, his or her ballet of spitting and touching or whatever they're doing isn't going to be what works for you in the green room before or the conductor drops the downbeat. So finding your specific answer to that question is paramount. I'll tell you this, I work with many leaders who I'll say, what do you do to prepare? At the AB3 group, one of our core approaches to this work is called the ready position of leadership. And the reason is because, I mean, I'm not much of an athlete, but when I played Little League, you could do as many sit-ups or, review the plays. We'd be sitting there, okay, if the ball comes to me, I throw it to second base. And for those of you that aren't baseball fans, you'll adapt this metaphor to whatever works for you as well. But you would get into this ready position, which was about being agile, right? Your glove up, your balance on your toes so that the crack of the bat, you were ready to go and whatever. Of course you've thought, what is the logical maneuver that I would make? Where should the ball go if it comes to me, right? Of course you needed to be quick and fast, but what you were preparing for was so that in that moment, you were able to show up for yourself at the highest level. So frequently in my work, I ask leaders, what do you do to prepare? I'm not talking about what coffee are you drinking this morning. I mean in the 5 minutes before you log online or you walk into a room, what are you doing to prepare? And often I'll hear about breathing and meditation, and I'll hear about lying on the floor, and all of that's great. Unless you've been getting feedback for the past 5-10 years that I wish I was getting more passion. I wish I was getting something that felt more You're preparing for something that nobody's asking you for. So it's important that we recognize that we have to be preparing our mindset for the mindset we need to be in. Athletes prepare to dominate. Like a soldier, they prepare to go into battle, right? It's a very different thing than how an actor prepares, who from 5 minutes to 5 minutes has to be consoling, has to be empathetic, has to be authoritative, has to be irate, has to be in love, moment to moment. So actors, like leaders, have to be able to prepare for a range of different mindsets that they need to be in from, scheduled meeting to scheduled meeting throughout the day.
I love that answer. And I'm going to tell you why specifically. It's a gap in how leaders are prepared and trained. You talked about preparing for a moment, and then we expanded it to how leaders are driven. Most leaders are promoted because they're a star engineer, they're a star salesperson. But most people don't build in the complexity of having to change right? The mask that you're wearing, change the persona that you have, right? Different than meeting with your executive peers, meeting with your team, meeting with a vendor, meeting with an outside board member. All of these moments require a different tonality, tempo, right? And that is not something that is typically delivered in the readiness programming for leaders. And then we are surprised, right? Why sometimes people show up the same in every moment, and then that feedback is a little all over the map. So I really appreciate that understanding and the way you delivered it in that context setting, right? Like that's super important. That's awesome.
First of all, people are rightly promoted for those reasons, for their expertise. And then they discover that the skills, what is it, the Peter Principle, got them where they are and what they need in the moment that they're in. It's the same as when you're giving a performance review to somebody, that person didn't wait, and you have some, hard feedback for someone. That person didn't wake up and say, today I'm going to make it hard for my colleagues to perform at the best. Today I'm going to ask questions that's going to annoy everyone. That person probably got feedback from their first or previous manager that said, we would love to hear more from you, or we would love, we feel like, don't hold back. And they believe they're showing up in the way that they were coached. They have a belief structure that says behave this way. They're not usually they're not trying to sabotage your workflow.
One of the things that you talk about, and I want to get your view and define this for our audience, the AI antidote.
Yes.
Right. And so I want to give you plenty of space. So I'm not going to do an over build up. It's just to say to our audience that we're all aware of the tsunami of how AI is dominating daily conversation. The
I can't believe we've gotten 17 minutes and we're just now
talking about it. Yeah, that's an odd change. And so I'd love to hear you unpack, right? What is the AI antidote?
First of all, it's not anti-AI. I mean, you'd be committing career fallacy, career suicide right now if you're not in sync with what's happening with AI. I teach human-to-human interactions, but I love utilizing these tools. It's as a business owner, it saved me a lot of time and definitely a lot of money with these tools. I'm impressed and totally bought in. When I talk about the AI antidote, it's as a counterbalance to what's happening in the world. There is no reason that anyone should trust that when you're reading an email, looking at a deck, even reading spreadsheets and the complex business analysis that people are doing, that you're actually seeing the thinking of the human beings that you're talking to. I'm not being too cynical, but we all have been given these tools that has elevated our ability, not just to have, spell-checked emails, but also really well-written, thought-provoking, beautiful metaphor emails. If you're not using it, you're behind the curve. The problem is that then you or your team has to walk in the room. And you're either living up to those standards that you've set using that technology, or you're falling short. And that's a trust gap. So the organizations that I still get to work with are the ones that value culture, the ones that value investing in communication and leadership performance, are the ones that recognize that as they're investing in their technological tools, they better be investing in their human skills, because those are becoming increasingly rarefied and valuable.
I completely agree. And I think that authenticity is going to be a more valuable commodity. Not commodity, more valuable skill, as everyone has access to the same tools. So the ability to use AI well, right? There is a gap now where people are adopting it. Some are using higher level versions, but over time, that's going to commoditize itself. And to your point, are you the same level of skill that was presented in your presentation that you sent before the meeting? Can you go off that script that AI partnered with you on, right? And talk through a concept with a different slant that you didn't prepare for, because you are the originator of those ideas, right? Yeah. And I see a lot of folks that are going to be ready for a little wide awakening of being caught, not just using the tool as a helper, but using the tool as a crutch, right?
Sure.
And being found out. So I'm tracking with what you're describing relative to that antidote.
And if you're a boss, if you're a leader, an owner, a founder, you need to make sure your team can do it too.
What do you see? And I've got some questions, but I want to extend that, because what you just talked about really quickly is not just you as an individual, but your team's capability, right, to rise to these new levels of expectation that are out there. What are some of the things that you're seeing that are working in leaders that you admire when they're looking at building a team, growing, that when you're talking to a leader, there's things you're working on, there's things you're helping folks with. But I want to flip that question and say, what are some of the things you see in leaders that you go, that guy's got the goods, that woman is amazing, right? They are really killing it. What are some of those things that you really appreciate when you see in leaders?
AI, I'm going to connect this back to the previous answer. AI, as we all know, it's the journey, not the destination. AI, this has been written about quite a bit, takes people immediately to the destination. It's often a high level of work. And as you just said, Don, what it does is it doesn't deepen people's connection to the output because they didn't have the journey, the collaboration, the team experience of having 7 different versions to get where they're headed, to have some failure along the way, to see what doesn't work and what did work. What I always find when I'm working with leaders, especially the ones that are invested in their team culture, not just, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and, reach your KPIs and make sure the ROI is there. I mean, we all fall into that pattern. I do it too. But when leaders are thinking about their culture, I use the metaphor from the theater of being the difference between being in rehearsal versus practice. Practice is what you do when you think you know the answer and you want to make sure that everybody can deliver at a high level and do it the same way every single time. And there is a moment where that is how you want to work. What that looks like, and usually I should say, a leader switches to practice mode too early. They get a big finalist presentation, an RFP on their calendar, and they think, all right, what slides are we going to show them? And who am I going to put in which position? And who's going to speak first? And here are the sentences that I want to hit and the data points that I want to show them. Bam, 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 bam. And everyone gets into practice mode. In the theater, you, after opening night, have to be able to deliver the same show over and over again. It needs to be well rehearsed and people need to understand what their role is. But real creativity, the best ideas emerge the longer you can stay in rehearsal mode. The longer a leader allows their team to say, well, what else could it be? What else are we missing? Let's hear the new person's idea. Let's try this. What happens if we go in the opposite order? What happens if we say out loud the hard thing? What happens if we don't tell that story? We wait to see if a question gets asked. What shower sentences emerge, middle of the night sentences emerge. And if any writer's room knows that as soon as the FCC or the editors start coming in, the creative process is over. You want to delay that as long as possible. So what I appreciate about the leaders that I get to work with, and as another version of the AI antidote, are the ones that still create space to find an even better product by saying in rehearsal mode instead of too quickly getting to the practice mode. And as a coach, I'll just say when I'm working with an executive, I need to know the answer. Is this person still open to rehearsal? Probably not the day before, but if I'm working with them a month before some big conference event, we can still be, if they'll allow me, we can still be in rehearsal mode. What else is possible?
That's awesome. Most people have a kind of a preconceived notion of how things are supposed to go. And you mentioned this, whether it's an RFP, a pitch, different things, and it's based on our experience. But then we also know that what the buyer wants is uniqueness, fresh ideas. And so when I listen to you talk about rehearsal mode, where are you going to get the fresh ideas? And so I'm going to take that note with me because that's where the new ideas live. Practice, you've already decided what you're going to do, right? And now you're figuring out how to execute what you've decided. And so I really appreciate the way that you broke that down because I can use that tomorrow, right? And that's one of the things that I admire in folks that I'm working with. Can you tell me something that's complex in simple terms that I can use tomorrow? And so that's why I really appreciate that thoughtful answer. Let's move from business to family a little bit. So you live in Manhattan. Your wife is also a creative Broadway director, 2 sons. How does being a highly creative household, right, impact your philosophy of leadership, creativity, and all the things?
Well, look, people value and make decisions based on many different motivators. You work and I work with people that are working at global conglomerates. They have their 401ks and they know their retirement. They have the illusion, all due respect to all of you, the illusion of certainty. It can all go away and often does quicker than you can believe. But those decisions are made to fill a need for certainty. Don, you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, and my understanding of your history is that you made a shift out of that world because probably you had a need, like I had a need, to be more in a creative mode. I would say that motivation, unlike certainty, is more motivated by originality. I want to do new things.
That's
Every
right.
week I have new projects. I want to find
That's
a way
right.
to people. I want to work on teams, but I do like the idea of having new people on those teams, every, meeting to meeting, every couple of days, every new project. So, people make decisions differently from one another. Some people, by the way, are dedicated to purpose. They want to feel like they're leaving the world different. That dinner you spoke about with Greg, that was brought together by someone that was in public service. That's a very different need that's being fulfilled than someone that's looking for respect, that want to be in the spotlight, that want to feel like they're the ones that run for office. Not that they're not also hopefully motivated by purpose as well,
Sure.
but they're the ones that want to be the lead of things. Like the theater, once you can let go of the idea that being in the theater means that you're in the spotlight, you can live a really good life. Some people get to be in the spotlight, but there's also a lot of people that love being a part of that community.
Yeah.
Right? That's another motivator. They just want to be around good people that are working on fun projects. I think people underestimate fun in their decision making. Obviously, you need to make sure the ROI is there. But sometimes when I'm working with a leader who's trying to make a big decision, we'll just talk about for the next 5 years, what would be the more fun job for you? What's wrong with that? And it's like, wait, I can consider that? Yeah, of course you can. So, as I think about what motivates me, what drives me, it's much different in my now 40s than it certainly was in my 20s. And I know that was true for you, Don, as well. But I haven't built a life, and my wife hasn't built a life based on certainty. Those of us that are in the consultative or gig economy, most of us don't have anything on our calendar 3 months out. You just go through life trusting that people are going to keep inviting you places, and based on what motivates you and how you want to build your life, it's often those motivators that are dictating your decisions more than some, worldview or grand plan.
So you help people get their messages across that lands with audiences better, right? How do you help people when the message doesn't land?
Oof,
right?
brutal.
How do you when they've done the rehearsal, they've got to practice, but for whatever reason, right? In that moment, it's not landing. How do you work with people to prepare them for that type of situation, and thus to minimize it happening again?
First of all, beginning with curiosity is always useful in these moments for them as well. Is it that they're towing the company line and the company line just mathematically, or it just doesn't resonate, or the numbers don't add up, or they just don't believe what their heart isn't in what their company wants them to communicate?
Or in the context that I'm describing, those are powerful examples. When you're communicating and your message real time is not landing in the room, you're not getting the response, the feedback, right? Your joke isn't landing, right? The strategy you're rolling out, people are nodding, but they're not rallying with you, right?
Yeah.
How do you help people manage those moments to where they don't just completely lose the moment, but they can potentially make it the best they can in that moment?
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about, I would say, is everybody's nightmare.
Right.
And it's hard to fix in the middle. I mean, once, there's 1,000 metaphors here, but once you've lost someone's trust or a room's trust, which can happen in a minute, it's really hard to earn it back, particularly to have the aptitude to figure out how to do it in the moment, especially when you can't just hit the pause button and see what's going on. That's a terrible feeling. And I would say that the strategy is to be reflective about what happened. Maybe if you can, ask some questions and start to think strategically about how to make sure that doesn't happen again. Jokes are great, but most people who tell jokes think that they're much funnier than their listeners, or many storytellers. I'm a great storyteller. They like telling their stories more than the room likes listening to them. So we have to, you have to get some honest and supportive feedback from colleagues, coaches, mentors that you trust. I would say this, though. If in the beginning, as quickly as possible, you can demonstrate that you're there with relevance, you can show them that you know them, you can tell them their story and demonstrate that you're prioritizing what matters to the room much more than what your outcomes and even your agenda is, they'll usually stay open to you, even if you make a mistake here or there, or even if they disagree with you. I mean, think about this. At the end of your meeting, they're going to say yes or no. They're going to say, we like that idea, or we don't like that idea. But they can say no to you and say, gosh, I hope Walk West sends us somebody else next time. I hope Don has somebody else on his team that we can meet. Or they can say, you know what? We're not going to go that route, right? What Don and his team recommended, we're not going to do that. But I've loved interacting with them. They feel like they would be great allies. I think you can establish that even in the first few moments, regardless of if you land the account. The question is, are you landing the account in 2028 because of the trust you built? But you're right. If you lose the room, it's probably worth just thinking through how you approached it in the first place and arming yourself with a better strategy. Usually, if you want different outcomes, you have to step into different patterns. So I wouldn't just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I'll give an example of one that happened to me. It was a few years ago, but I still keep it in mind, and it keeps me humble, and it keeps me in that preparation and that rehearsal mode to really understand the audience and the timing of that audience's readiness for what I'm describing. I did a virtual presentation to an executive leadership team, global business, and this did not go good. So I'm going to tell you this is not where I win in the end, right? This is one where I have learned in the end, and I'm better in other places, right?
These are the stories leaders need to tell. Their teams need to hear these stories. So everyone who's listening, we're about to learn something really important.
And so I prepped and went through with my stakeholder, the presentation and everything. Green. This is going to be amazing. All the things, right? Come to find out, my presentation slot was right after the financial review meeting for the leadership team. Numbers weren't good. They were having to discuss layoffs, and the CEO was not into the topic I was describing, right? So now, how did I learn from that, right? And then I went in doing my thing, man. I'm doing my thing, and the leader in the room is just sitting there like he is pulling, like I'm pulling teeth, like I'm doing dental work, right? So I know I'm losing. I'm like, this is not.
They're watching him or her as much as they're watching you.
Right, I'm like, this is not going good. Ari, this went so bad, I didn't even charge them, right? I just said, forget it. I just said, keep your money, right? Like just keep it. But the thing that I learned, and I do this much better today, is I don't typically do briefings with the C-suite and the CEO in particular without having a 15-minute check-in with the CEO. My learning was I took the stakeholders that were right below the C-suite, and now I ask, listen, this is a pretty important meeting. You all are paying a significant amount of money for me to come in, right? Let's get 15, 20 minutes, and let's walk through the agenda, the topic, the timing with the CEO so I can get some feedback and some tweaks. And what
Sure.
that single thing has done for me over the years is, number one, I get a little more face time with the person in charge. That's helped me navigate. But number two, and this is a thing I want to share with my audience, CEOs and business leaders are really clear of what their hot buttons are. And they will tell you when given that space to ask. And I'll ask, when we have this hour, what are the 2 or 3 things you want to be sure that the team walks away? And then I make sure I manage those key critical moments. So even now, if a presentation isn't my most dynamic, isn't the best thing I've ever done, I've hit those 3 points. I've made sure we went through, and I always, and what it's done is raised my floor for what a bad meeting looks like. My floor now for a tough meeting is a B minus, and I still can get to an A plus, because you never can control the dynamics and what's going on and all the things. But I tell you, that was not an amazing moment, but I learned from it.
Yeah. Well, we don't get through life, unbruised.
That's right.
That sounds terrible, but the learning is important, and I'm sure the room gained a lot from whatever you shared as well. Look, there's a difference between what it sounds like you did, which was prepare what I want to say. I know the topic. They invited me. The CEO is signing my check. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to say what I want to say. You're preparing to demonstrate your high level of competence, and it makes sense. When we work with leaders, we go through a process of preparing for impact, which is quite different, right? Preparing to be influential. And what you're doing by talking to the CEO, what are your careabouts? What are your hot buttons? What are your no-goes? Is how you not just prepare to demonstrate competence, but prepare to be influential. There's one other piece that I'll add. When I'm working with a keynote speaker, I'll say to them, same thing as ready position, right? How are you going to be agile? Leave space, particularly in your opening remarks, to reference back to something that the room just heard. It's part of your preparation. Even if you discover, that day that you're going to be speaking after this CEO, it's to your advantage to make sure that you're watching the CEO for whatever they say, so that you can call back to demonstrate that you're in the same room as everybody else. They're not just digesting whatever you planned to say a week ago, but that you're hearing what they just heard.
As we wind our time together, I could talk to you all day. But we have we have a little bit of a time constraint, but that's all right. What would you like to share with our audience about communication and leadership that maybe I didn't ask or we didn't get to? What would you like to, as we land the plane, what would you like to leave our audience with?
There's a real desire when you're in a spotlight or in a conversation or a high stakes moment, meeting, interaction, to consistently show people the best you have to offer. And you are right that people are assessing whether your motivations are connected to their motivations. Of course, whether your substance is of the quality and at the level that they respond to. And if you're feel like a credible person because of the way you interact with the questions they ask, of course, the stories you share, your ability to show up in that moment, to not collapse under the weight of that spotlight. But showing people the best you have to offer doesn't mean just telling people how brilliant you are over and over again. A lot of that, like Don, you just did, is showing them the moments where you didn't have it all figured out, where you're able to say, look, we don't agree. I don't agree with you, but I'm not questioning your humanity. I'm not questioning your integrity, whether or not you're a good person, right? As a leader, we need to be able to step into other people's shoes without sacrificing, your own competence, your own integrity, your own credibility, but demonstrate that you're able to understand how they formed that point of view. And in the way you communicate the ideas, the way you give feedback, the stories that you do decide to tell, people are learning what it means to be in relationship with you. If you're trying to overwhelm people with your competence, show them every slide. If you're trying to bore them, stick to the numbers. If you're trying to frustrate or alienate people, never ask them questions. But if you're trying to create an environment where people thrive, where they feel connected, where they feel valued, you really do need to rethink the performative, the inclusivity, the intimacy of the way that you're leading. And it requires you to be more human, not less human.
Ari, thank you for those closing comments. I'm going to end our conversation with just recapping a couple of things that you said that are powerful takeaways for me personally, and I know our audience is going to get a lot out of. The one is communication skills help you have the unfair advantage. And that's what we're all chasing in business, right? If we're really direct and honest, we're trying to figure out how to have that unfair advantage, right? And working on those communication skills start moving you in that direction. The other thing is that we all have to manage that illusion of certainty, right? That we have all the answers, that this is the only data that matters, and managing that illusion and staying curious, staying open, right, to new information. And the third thing that I really want to leave and land the plane on is people underestimate fun. And that you can have a good time with people, that you can smile, you can stay focused on the standard, the results, but it doesn't have to be drudgery to get there. And I'll give you the last word, but those are the three things. You said a lot of really powerful things, but those are three things that I wrote down, I circled, I starred as I was taking notes and just listening, both as the host, but also just learning from you. And so I'm going to give you the final moment as we sign off. If there's any last words that you'd like to say to the audience.
I recently lost my father. So I've been thinking a lot about my relationship to him. And he taught me something early on. He asked me to replace the light bulbs on our roof. I grew up in the suburbs, not here in Manhattan. And we used to have a roof that came to like a point. And at that point, there were floodlights that shone onto the yard. And for whatever reason, he determined in my teenage years that I should be the one to climb up on what's that kind of ladder where it's not like this, you push out one end, you lean it against a draw ladder maybe. Anyway, and I was to climb up and do it. And I'm brave in a lot of ways, but I'm not tough. And, going up on a rickety ladder, it didn't feel safe to me. I had to tell my dad I wasn't like a snotty teen, I don't think. I was happy to help, but I just didn't feel safe or comfortable doing it. And I remember feeling like this is a no-go for me. Ask my sister or find somebody else. And he looked at me and he said, if there was an audience here, you would do it. And when I say that people have to figure out what it takes for them to walk into a room or into a spotlight, into a meeting and show people the best it have to offer, and it's a very personal decision, that's really what I'm talking about. He was right. If I have eyes on me, I know my superpower, my supercharge. When somebody throws me a ball, I can catch it. I have spidey senses on stage in front of an audience. I can hear things different. I can find the jokes. That's just what's become true for me. And every single one of you has some superpower that you can tap into or not. But it's your responsibility to figure out how you get there so that your best days and your worst days aren't an accident. My dad helped me figure that out really early on. Whether there's people in the room watching me or not, when I'm not feeling brave or safe or I have to do something that feels hard, I imagine an audience, eyes on me. Now, I know that wouldn't work for all of you. I know that. But that's not the point. High performers know what works for them. When I'm working with the leader, one of the most meaningful things we think about managing mindset, is what does it take for you to show people the best you have to offer in the moments that matter most? It's a very personal exploration.
I am going to let that be the last word. Thank you for sharing that openly. Thank you for that closing. Ari, how can people get in touch with you?
Great.
Because I want to make sure that as people are enjoying this moment and they're hearing the unique way and the unique perspective you're putting on communication, on leadership. How can people get in touch?
Thank you so much. The AB3 group, if you put a www dot and then the ab3group.com, you will find us. You'll find us at that same title on LinkedIn. And you can always reach out directly to me at Ari at theab3group.com. And it would be my pleasure to continue this conversation with any one of you.
Ari, this has been a meaningful conversation. What stands out is leaders who make that great impact aren't the ones who try to sound to be perfect. They're the ones who show up with clarity, presence, and trust that really matter. That's what we're trying to do at High Octane Leadership. We thank you for being a part of our team, a part of our network now. We're not only friends now, but we're a part of each other's team. And so if we can help one another, it's not whether or not we will do it. It's just how do we get it on the calendar and get the timing together. And so what I'd like to say to our audience is this has been great. Thank you all for trusting us with your time and your energy and listening to us, and DT over and out. Make it a great day.
Thank you for joining us on High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. Today's episode is a step in our collective journey towards leadership excellence. Remember, every story we share and every insight we gain is a piece in the puzzle of our leadership journey. For more insight and detail, hit the subscribe button so that we can stay connected. For deeper information and more episodes, go to donaldthompson.com. Continue to lead with vision and purpose, and until we meet again, embrace your role as a high-octane leader in the ever-evolving world of business.